In this episode of the House of Lechmere, we're going to cut to the chase. We're going to look at all the murders in the Whitechapel Murder file held by Scotland Yard and some others besides, and other similar attacks, and see how Charles Lechmere can be linked to all of them, not just the Bucks Row murder of Polly Nichols. It's a standard objection by some naysayers that Lechmere can be linked to the murder of Polly Nichols, but not to any of the other crimes. Well, he can be linked to virtually all of them, as no other suspect can. Most other suspects can't be linked to a single crime scene, let alone any of the others. The unique thing about Charles Lechmere is we can do a crime scene investigation for virtually all of the crimes and place Lechmere there and show how he committed all of these crimes. And we're going to go through briefly all of them with you today. I have here Scotland Yard Investigates by Stuart Evans and Don Rumbelow that reproduces in it this useful document which was stolen by the goody-goody Donald Swanson and found in his papers. It's a listing of all or most of the Whitechapel murders and associated crimes, which we'll be going through with a couple of others on top. This is what happened to most of the documents in the Whitechapel murder files. Individual policemen purloined them and took them home themselves. You'll notice that some of the crime scenes are marked with a white marker and some with a black marker. I'll go into more detail on the ones with the white marker because they form a particular pattern which I want to illustrate here. The ones in the black marker I'll deal with first in chronological order but in less detail. So, what are the scenes of locations of significance for Charles Lechmere? First of all, at the early part of this case, he lived down here in James Street, near his mother, who lived in Mary Ann Street, just around the corner. And his workplace was Pickford's at Broad Street, over here. We see straight away there's an axe between where Charles Lechmere lived and his work, taking in two of the black markers, which I'm going to take in and talk about shortly. The first of which was Annie Millward, this one here, so on the axis. That's where she lived, White's Row. She was attacked on the 25th of February and stabbed in her legs. We don't actually know where she was attacked location-wise, apart from the fact she lived in White's Row. She was taken to Whitechapel Infirmary and from there was taken to South Grove Workhouse, which is near what is now Marlin Tube Station and sort of backs onto Tower Hamlets Cemetery. She's taken on the 21st of March. While she was inside South Grove, close by on Maidman Street, on the 28th of March, Ada Wilson was attacked in her house and stabbed in the throat, non-fatally. Now, lots of people regard these two attacks on these two ladies as being early attempts by the unsuccessful attempts by the whoever was Jack the Ripper, where he was learning on the job, as it were. Also, but the attack on Ada Wilson, being as it was in her house, is regarded as an exception. But as we will see as this series develops, there were attacks in houses, so they may well have been examples of unsuccessful attempts by the culprit. In any case, 3 days later, on the 31st of March, actually Annie Millward did die of a ruptured artery due to an ulcer in her heart, which might actually have been a later causation from the stab wounds she'd had earlier on. Now, the next murder we're going to talk about is that of Emma Smith. She was brutally attacked just off Brick Lane on the 3rd of April. She managed to stagger back to her lodging house and she was taken by her deputy, a lady. She was escorted or helped to London Hospital, where she died several days later. She said she was attacked by three men suffered internal injuries of a horrific nature. But she told her story to the doctor and her friends before she died, or a version of her stories. Now, because she was attacked by three people, it's usually regarded as not being a Ripper case, and it would have probably been regarded as manslaughter rather than murder, because she died 4 days later and the wounds weren't with a knife, it was the blunt instrument. So it was probably would have been regarded as manslaughter. But it's pointed out by Tom Westcott, I'll give him credit for this, that she may have made this story up because she was a prostitute and didn't want to let on that she'd been attacked in the course of being a prostitute, so possibly invented the story of being attacked by a gang because she didn't anticipate dying when she was telling this story. There might be something in that, but for now that's all we're going to talk about. But again, she was attacked on the axis between where Lechmere lived at the time and where he worked. So to recap, I've been using the 1893 Ordnance Survey map to show you the first three attacks of 1888. One in February, one in March, one in April. And I'll be referring back now to the document that Inspector Swanson stole from Scotland Yard. Inspector Swanson was the eyes and ears of Warren, the head of the Metropolitan Police, and was in charge of all the paperwork to do with the Ripper murders. And we're back to Emma Smith here, the first entry in this file note. Now, the next issue of significance was actually that Charles Lechmere, who had been living at 20 James Street, on the 11th or 12th of June, moved to 22 Doveton Street. So I'll move Charles Lechmere. He's moved location way away from his mother's house. Now it is time to discuss the murder of Martha Tabram. Less than 2 months after Lechmere moved into his new residence at Doveton Street. I will note that there are several ways for Lechmere to get from Doveton Street to his work at Pickford's. He could go the route down Hanbury Street, the route down Old Montague Street and Wentworth Street, or perhaps even down the main road, Whitechapel High Street, and up to Pickford's, depending on how the mood took him, perhaps. This is where Martha Tabram was murdered. She was found dead, viciously stabbed with 39 wounds on the stairwell of George Yard buildings, with her body left, as they say, on display, legs apart, to shock and awe whoever found her. It was Monday, August the 6th, a bank holiday. Pearlie Poll, otherwise known as Mary Ann Colony, was out drinking with Martha Tabram in the pubs in the area. They were both prostitutes. Martha's sister-in-law, Anne Morris, saw her outside the White Swan at 11 p.m. that evening, just around the corner from a local Pickford's depot. There's the White Swan, there's the Pickford's depot. They were also seen in a pub on the corner of Wentworth Street and Commercial Street. But Pearlie Poll left her as she went up Angel Alley with a soldier. Martha went up the next alleyway called George Yard with another soldier. That was 11:45. At 1:50 in George Yard buildings, Elizabeth Mahoney was returning from a night out and saw no one or nothing on the landing. At 3:30, Another resident, Alfred Crowe, went into the building and saw what he thought was a rough sleeper on that same landing. It was almost certainly Martha Tabram. 3:30. It wasn't until 4:45, with the first rays of dawn, that John Reeves, coming down from his flat in the same building, noticed the dead body of Martha Tabram, and he raised the alarm. In the early hours of the morning of the 7th of August. The doctor estimated the time of death might have been 2:45. This road here is Wentworth Street. This road is the quickest route for Charles Lechmere to get to his work at Pickford's. That is the quickest route. It is a 10 yards from Wentworth Street to George Yard Buildings. If Lechmere took his quickest route to work, and he was innocent, pretend he was innocent for a moment, he would have walked past the dead body, within 10 yards of the dead body of Martha Tabram, while she was lying there, undiscovered on that landing. Unless, of course, he did it himself. So, we had 3 attacks at the beginning of 1888. One in February, one in March, one in April. The last being the fatal attack upon Emma Smith. About 2 months later, Charles Lechmere moved from his house in James Street to Doveton Street. We know the date almost exactly because we know the dates his children left Bett Street School and moved to Essex Street School. He moved out of the immediate environment of his mother, who was clearly, we can tell, she was a very strong-willed woman. She set up businesses through her life. She married 3 times. She looked after one of Charles Lechmere's kids for the entirety of that child's life. Clearly a very strong influence on his life, and suddenly, for the first time, he's moved out of her orbit. 2 months after that was the murderous assault upon Martha Tabram. That was 4 months after the last attack on Emma Smith. There was a 4-month gap. In the middle of that 4 months, almost exactly in the middle, was when Charles Lechmere moved. His route to work at Pickford's, now the fastest route, took him down Wentworth Street, 10 yards roughly from where Martha Tabram was killed. And he would have walked down that road had he taken the shortest, most logical route to work, at exactly the same time when she was lying dead on that stair landing. Presuming he hadn't done it himself, of course. The next episode, we're going to look at the first of the canonical murders, that of Mary Ann Nichols, Polly Nichols, the murder for which Charles Lechmere is most closely associated. So, tune in to the next episode and please subscribe. Thank you.